Hi guys, I'm going to talk about the international trade chapter. So the first part of the chapter has been talked about in the first topic in the fundamental of economics, chapter 1. But that was a really long chapter. So if you guys want to review that first, because the first half is the technical. Okay. So trade. Why do we trade? So basically, there's three reasons. Number one, we trade. The most common cause of trade is that we have lower cost alternatives, that somebody else can produce goods for us cheaper. That's why we trade. Second, then we might have an increased diversity of choices. So, for example, look at all the cars we have on the road today. So BMWs, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, Hyundai, Toyota. Those are different countries, different car from different country, not from US. So when we trade, we have more diversity of the same good. And then if you're like my wife, you're buying Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Burberry, those are not US too. They're from overseas. Okay, so very expensive purses. So that's trade. And the last one is access to resources, which don't have them over here. Now, for example, the company that sells the most diamond, it's a company called De Beers, and then more than 80% of the world's De Beer are coming from or diamonds coming from Africa, and that's how we trade. Because if you don't trade, you don't have diamonds. Okay. All right. Next. So why do we trade? Number one, because comparative advantage. Now we talked about this before in the very first chapter. So comparative advantage is the ability to produce a good at a lower opportunity cost. That is our comparative advantage. And also remember what's the absolute advantage. So absolute advantage is whenever you can produce the good, or actually whenever you can produce more of the good, that's the absolute advantage. And the comparative is at a lower opportunity cost. That's comparative advantage. So whoever can do it cheaper in terms of opportunity cost. And remember, opportunity cost from the first chapter is not about a dollar term. It's about in terms of the other good. So for example, if you produce an apple, it might cost you 5 banana. That's the opportunity cost. Okay, so how much of the other good would it cost you to produce this good? Because for every production we have for anybody, there's always a trade-off. You produce more apples, you must give up more banana to produce it. So you cannot produce bananas anymore. All right, so we have an example over here. So these are apple oranges. So let's suppose Australia can produce a maximum 50 apple, 150 orange, and Canada is 200. Now let me show you the same method we did before for the first topic, how to do this type of problem. I'm gonna do our 4 prices, okay? Show me OneNote. Close that. All right, so 4 prices. Okay, I'm gonna do the price of apple in Australia, the price of orange in Australia, the price of apple in Canada, the price of orange in Canada. That's an ugly speed letter day. All right, so we're gonna do 4 fractions. Remember, whatever the fraction is, whatever the price you're looking for, the maximum good goes on the bottom. So for an apple in Australia, the maximum they can produce 50 apples. So 50 apples goes on the bottom. And then the maximum of the other good for the same country goes on top. That will be 150 oranges. And simplified, so 150 over 50, that will be 3 orange. That means in Australia, to produce 1 apple will cost you 3 oranges. And then for orange, do the same thing. But remember, there's a shortcut. So if you have 3 orange for apples in Australia, then for the same country, the other good, you take the 3, flip over, that's the answer. So 1 over 3, but apples. So in Australia, produce 1 orange costs you 1 over 3 apples. For Canada, I'm going to do 200. This is apples, so orange on top, so 200 oranges over 200 apples. Simplified, this will be just 1 orange. Excuse me. All right, and then do the over for orange in the same country in Canada. Flip over. So one flip over, just one. Okay, so just one apple. That means in Canada, to produce one orange will cost you one apple. Now we have some floor prices over here. So 3 orange for 1 apple, 1/3 apple for 1 orange, and then 1 orange and 1 apple. All right, so we're gonna compare to see who has a lower opportunity cost. Now to do the opportunity cost, we're gonna do whoever have a lower opportunity cost, that's your comparative advantage. Now let's look at apple first. So for apple, in Australia, it costs you 3 oranges. In Canada, costs you 1 orange. This is lower. That's comparative advantage for Canada. And then remember, it's always one country, one comparative advantage. So if Canada is good in apples, that means automatically Australia must be good in oranges. And that's the case because if you look at over here, in Australia, for orange, costs you 1/3 apple. In Canada, for orange, costs you 1 apple. This is lower. That's what you call it. That's our comparative advantage for Australia in the term of oranges. Okay, so it's always one country, one comparative advantage. All right, now why do you know that? Because once you know the comparative advantage, you know which country is good at what, and then each country can specialize it and then produce only that one good. So Canada will produce apples, Australia will produce oranges, and then when they specialize, you can have more good between each countries, between both countries. So let's do example. Let's suppose for these two countries here, before they trade, each country is doing half and half. So Australia produce half the oranges, half the apple, and then Canada produce half oranges, half apple. So then, if that's the case, Australia will have half of 50, 25 apples, and then 75 oranges. And then for Canada, also half and half. So that will be 100 apples and 100 oranges. All right, so if you combine them together, so between two countries here, we're gonna have 125 apple and then 175 oranges. I need more space to write this. So 175, come on. 175 oranges. All right, so that's what they had before trade. So with no trade, that's what the country had between two of them. So doing half and half. Now with trade, we said each country will specialize in their comparative advantage, and only produce that good. So Australia has a comparative advantage in orange, so they will produce only orange. So Australia will produce only orange. There will be 150 oranges, and then Canada will focus on apples only. They produce 200 apples. All right, so that's what they have between the two countries with trade. Now notice if you compare between trade, before trade and after trade. So before trade, you have 125 apple. With trade, you have 200 apple, right? So you will gain 75 apples. And then for oranges, before trade, you have actually lost a little bit, okay? So before trade, you have 175 oranges. Now with trade, you have 150 oranges, a little bit less than before. But overall, it's gain more. So even though you lose 25 oranges, but overall you do gain more apples. Okay, but this is a bad example from the book. If you look at my previous examples in the fundamentals, the very first video, you will see that when country trade, and then between both of them together, they'll gain more of both good, and that's called gains from trade. Okay, so because we have more good, then when each country specializes in their own productions, they're doing what they're best at, then we'll have more of both good, then both countries are better off. Okay. All right, and then there's also something called a term of trade. So let me show you what that is. All right, so term of trade says the seller's opportunity cost for the good must be less than equal to the term of trade, and then also less than equal to the buyer's opportunity cost of the good. Guys, the same with term of trade, think this as the price of the good. So for this price, how would I make it work? right? So suppose that you have a, what do you have? You have a apple that you want to sell, and then you want to sell that for $1. I want to buy an apple, and I want to pay for the apple for $2. And I will come together, agree to a price, and somewhere in between, and that's called a term trade. So this term trade only works when it's in the middle, when it's in between your seller's opportunity cost and the buyer opportunity cost. Now, if that's not the case, I've got a problem. So for our example there, between reason. All right, so we said, what did we say before? For Australia and Canada, let me look at the prices again. I forgot. All right, here it goes. It's 3 orange and then 1 orange. So let's do this. All right, so in terms of Apple, I mean, when we talk about the Apple market, for Australia, when they produce an apple, it will cost them 3 oranges. So 3 oranges for Australia. This is Australia. And then for Canada, it will cost them 1 oranges. Now, this is how they will trade. So seller, which is Canada, they will sell their apple for 1 orange, and then buyer, the Australians, will buy their apple for 3 oranges. So that's why the price has to be somewhere in between. Now, let's suppose that's not the case. Let's suppose the sellers want to sell their oranges for want to sell their apples for 4 oranges. But buyers for Australia, they only want to pay 3 oranges. Then there's no trade in between. So for this trade to work, the seller's opportunity cost has to be lower than the buyer's opportunity cost. Okay. And if you go back to the example we used before, that's always the case. All right. We can also use what we learned from topic 4, the consumer surplus, producer surplus, to look at how does trade benefit a country. Now, first we're gonna assume that there's gonna be a price taker for everybody. So every country in this example, they're all small country, so they cannot influence or ask for their own prices. They have to take what the price is already set in the world market. So you're gonna have a domestic price and then the world price. Now, to see the direction of trade, if your world price is more than domestic price, that means this country can do it cheaper, then they will export this good. Now, other way around, that if you have the domestic price more than world price, that means everybody else can do it cheaper, then you do more expensive, then you should import this good and let somebody else do it for you. All right, so let's see how this works. So normally, in this case over here, this intersection, that's our equilibrium price, so domestic price before trade, and that's your world price. So notice how the domestic price is more than world price. Then what you have here is import. You're going to import this good. And to find out how many we import have, this point here, that's our quantity supplied. So how much our business will produce at home. This point here is our quantity demanded. That's how many our consumers will buy. Now, normally we call this difference a shortage, but it's not a shortage anymore because here it's called an import. So we don't have a shortage. We're going to buy them from overseas. That's an import. And then vice versa. If you look at this other example, this is our domestic price. So now the world price is more than domestic price. So you can do it cheaper now, and then everybody else does it more expensive. So right here on the supply curve, that's our quantity supplied. On the demand curve, that's our quantity demanded. And normally we call this our surplus. That's not surplus anymore. Okay, we're gonna sell this overseas. So that will be our export. Okay, so that's how we determine the import export. And let's look at how this will affect our consumer surplus and producer surpluses. So remember from topic 4, that our consumer surplus is the area on top, producer surplus is the area on the bottom. And then remember, the goal for any consumer is to maximize our consumer surplus. The goal for any producer is to maximize the producer surplus. Now, for this consumer surplus, it's always below the demand curve, above the price line. And then for producer surplus, it's below the price line, above the supply curve. All right, so once you have trade, So this is our export here. When you have export, price goes higher, and then you're going to go all the way up to the new world price. That's your price line. Between your supply curve, this big triangle here in red, that is our producer surplus. And then consumer is only the small triangle on the top. So compare this to the previous graph over here. See the consumer surplus smaller now. So consumer works off when they export. I mean, it makes sense, right? So when you export, basically your domestic consumers now must compete against foreign consumers because there will be somebody else want to buy the same apple, and the price for that good will go up. When the price goes higher, your domestic consumer works off. But however, your domestic producers are much better off because now they can sell more good to overseas countries, more demand for their good. So the overall, notice this triangle here, that's new, right? This wasn't there before. That is called the gains from trade. So this is why the export is good, okay? Because you have extra surpluses from the producers. That's more than before. Never had it before. That's called gains from trade. Now, so consumer become worse off. They better pay higher prices. Producer become better off. Their profit goes higher, and the overall economy is better off. And that's why countries, they always want to do more export because export creates more jobs. You have more income for the country, and then overall economy is better off. Now, do that mean import is worse off? Let's take a look. Not necessarily. So still same supply demand curve. This will be before you trade. Now, once you trade, you're gonna have a lower price. This is the world price. So we're gonna import this good. And notice how the consumer surplus is much bigger now, right? So consumer, they are better off, but the producer is much smaller. So producer is worse off. Now, I want you to focus on this little triangle here, this green triangle. We never had this before because before your consumer surplus was everywhere over here. Producer surplus is everywhere down here. But this new triangle, we never had it before. So this new triangle that's given to the consumer surplus, this is called, you guessed it, gains from trade. So that's why our economy is also better off when we import is good. So to summarize, it doesn't matter what you do. If you import, if you export, as long as you allow free trade, economy is better off. Now, free trade means that there is no government intervention. And then consumers and producers are free to engage with other foreign consumers and producers to buy and sell whatever they want. It's called free trade. And that's why you guys probably heard this term before, NAFTA, right? So NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. I mean, at least that's for now, okay, because they are working on it to change everything. So NAFTA means that between US, Canada, and Mexico, there is free trade. So buyers and sellers can freely buy and sell their good. Now, President Trump just recently announced that we're going to increase tariff on everything from Mexico. Well, not everything, steels from Mexico, aluminums from Canada, and also Europe. So that will reduce our free trade, okay? All right, tariff. So what's a tariff? So tariff is a tax or fee on import. So whatever you import from other countries is a tariff. Now tariff, let me show you this. So when you have a tariff, it will increase how much the world price is. So which means the consumers must pay more. So consumers with tariff, they will be worse off. So in this case over here, let's see, you know what? I think it's better with a new graph. This is too messy. Let me do a new graph. I don't need that. All right. Need bigger. It's too small. Okay, so we have a supply curve. We have a demand curve. And then right here is the world price. All right, so supply, demand, price, and quantity. Now, obviously, in this case over here, our domestic price, which is right here, is more than the world price. I'm going to import this good. Okay, let's do a tariff. So tariff will be world price plus T. That's tariff. So tariff, you increase your price over here. All right, so let's label this. So this area A, B, this is supposed to be a B. C, D, E, F, G. All right, so with no tariff, I'll just call it free trade. That sounds better. Free trade. So which means no tariff. So free trade, your price is PW. That's your world price. And then your consumer surplus with free trade will be area A, B, C, D, E, and F. Basically the whole big triangle on top. Producer surplus is area G. Now with tariff, your consumer surplus will be a little bit less now because you're going to pay higher prices. So with tariff, your consumer surplus will be area A and B. So this triangle on top, the smaller triangle on top, that is your new consumer surplus. Now, producer surplus will be area below. So producer surplus is different in color. So producer surplus will be area over here. That's your producer surplus. So producer surplus is C and G. Which leave us with the D, E, and F. Area E, this. Area E, that's our government tax revenue, so tariff revenue. So government get area E. Don't use G, I already used G before. Terrible handwriting. Not much better. Government get area E. Now, what happened to the other area? What happened to this D and F? What happened? Nobody have it, right? So D and F, remember this from previous chapters, this is called debt weight loss. That means the economy is worse off because we're losing some total surpluses. So tariff works, but tariff will lower your efficiency, and tariff will create more debt weight loss, which means tariff is bad. Okay. All right, so there's tariff. With tariff, consumer will become worse off because you're going to pay higher prices with tariff. Producer will be better off because they can sell their good at higher prices now. Government become better off because they can collect more tariff revenue. But overall, economy is worse off because of the debt weight loss. Okay, so loss in total surpluses. So pretty much everybody is better off except the consumers. But the loss from consumers is so much more than the gain from other parties. So overall economy is worse off. All right, so quota. So quota means it's the numerical limit on the amount of import can be imported. So it's a hard limit on how many goods we can import from other countries. Now import is less popular than tariff because for import it will achieve the same outcome, but the only difference is if you do import, then we don't have. If you do quota instead of tariff, then we won't have any tariff revenue for the government. That this tariff revenue will be actually given to the foreign companies, the company overseas. Okay. So for those companies getting higher profit. So that's why quota is less popular than tariff. But quota is more effective to implement because you can actually put a limit, a hard limit on how much import you can have. Tariff it just goes on, that goes with demand and supply. That goes with how much, what is the tolerance for higher prices for consumers. So there's difference in implementations. Very rarely do you see quota being used. Again, the reason why because this over here with tariff that's given to the government. With a quota, this is the extra profit for the foreign companies. Okay, so that's why it's bad. All right, so guys, that's it for this chapter. Good luck on your homeworks, and then I will see you for the next chapter. Okay. All right. See you later. Bye bye.